Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's virtual P&R planning meeting. As usual, I need to run through various points of procedure and housekeeping before we move to the agenda. Today's meeting is being held under the virtual meetings regulation using Microsoft Teams. All committee decisions will be as valid as decisions made at a physical meeting held in the town hall. For those members of the public watching the meeting on the YouTube link, P&R committee members often use more than one screen during the meeting to look at committee papers, which can mean that a member is not looking at their camera at any given moment. Today's meeting is being streamed live on the internet, and a recorded version will be on the Council's website within 48 hours. As Chairman, I can confirm public written statements will be read out by Council officers. The Planning Committee consists of 13 members, adjusted to accord with the political balance agreed by all the group leaders and the Chief Executive. Please confirm you are leaving the meeting in regard to a declared disclosable pecuniary interest. Compliance is essential to comply with the law. An officer will invite you back into the meeting following determination of the agenda item. Voting procedure. Please use the chat function when proposing or seconding a motion. State clearly what you are moving. This will aid the general public following the planning process online. Voting on applications will be carried out by roll call. The legal officer will call out each councillor's name in alphabetical order. The vote will be taken on the basis that you have heard the entire debate on the application. Please state if your vote is for the motion or against the motion, or if you wish to abstain. This will ensure the vote is correctly recorded. Voting on matters of procedure, such as confirmation of the minutes, will be undertaken using the chat function. Please ensure all mobiles are switched off and your IT devices are muted when not speaking. Are there any questions? In which case, Hazel, please undertake the roll call for today's meeting.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Bridger.
Present.
Councillor Bryant.
Present.
Councillor Cherry.
Present.
Councillor Cole.
Present.
Councillor Crew. I can see Councillor Crew on screen. Councillor Crockford Hawley. Thank you, Councillor Crew. Councillor Crockford Hawley.
Present.
Councillor Harley. Yes, I think Councillor Harley is in the meeting. Councillor Hearn.
Muted. Anne, you are muted. That's it.
I'm not now. Present.
Good girl, you're learning. Oh, God.
Thank you, Councillor Hearn.
Councillor Hearn.
Thank you. Councillor Keating.
Present.
Councillor McQuillan. Councillor Solomon.
Present.
Councillor Tonkin.
Present.
Councillor Tucker.
Present.
Chairman, the Head of Legal and Democratic Services has received apologies from Councillor McQuillan, and today's substitutions are Councillor Tonkin for Councillor Leigh Morgan and Councillor Tucker for Councillor Cronolly. The officers attending today are Richard Kent, Simon Exley, Roger Wilmot, James Wigmore, Paul Payton, Sally Evans from the Place Directorate, and Sue Buck, Mike Riggle, Michelle Chesterman and Hazel Brinton from Corporate Services. That concludes the roll call, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 1, public speaking. Addresses by members of the public to be read out by officers, and we have 2 addresses for today's meeting. The first address relates to agenda item 6, reserve matters application at Youngwood Lane, Nailsea. Lady Richards supports the proposal and her address will be read out by Michelle Chesterman.
Thank you, Chairman. Taylor Wimpey submitted a reserves matter planning application in September 2020 for the land north of Youngwood Lane and east of Netherton Wood Lane, Nailsea, consisting of 168 homes and associated infrastructure. We've worked with officers to develop the proposals in response to all feedback received, resulting in the high quality proposals in front of you for consideration today. Key updates of our application are as follows. We presented the application to Nailsea Town Council and the South West Design Review Panel, and following this feedback, multiple changes have been made to the proposals, including additional tree planting, improved character areas and a wider footpath cycle link. In accordance with condition 21 of the outline consent, we have accommodated a potential future link road into our proposals. Following detailed discussions, Paul Patton and highway officers at North Somerset Council, this route has now been agreed. We have revised our drainage proposals following comments received from North Somerset Internal Drainage Board and have had verbal confirmation that these changes are acceptable. Changes include adding 5-metre maintenance strips to attenuation ponds and downstream defenders to ensure there are no issues with water quality. Following dialogue with the Council's urban designer, we have created bespoke apartment blocks, introduced higher quality materials and enclosures, and improved the relationship between the build form and the existing environment. We are retaining and enhancing as much of the existing vegetation as possible, and this creates the principal character of the development. Reinforcement planting is provided along the existing batch routes, where street lighting is reduced to enhance the wider environment. Additional play areas, orchard planting and informal open spaces will be included in our Phase 2 proposals later this year. The 2 access points to the development are being delivered in accordance with the approved outline drawings. This application does not include any changes from the previously agreed arrangements. We are incorporating Nailsea pennant stone into our enclosures and are exploring the potential to take some stone directly from the site itself to deliver these. The proposed affordable housing has been integrated into the proposals in accordance with the Section 106 agreement. This includes a proportion of wheelchair and accessible units. The development meets the local authority's parking requirements with an average of 2.1 allocated parking spaces per home. There are also 16 visitor parking spaces. In order to promote sustainable living, every home will have an external power supply to enable home car charging. There will also be photovoltaic roof panels provided on the development. A footpath and cycleway will be provided through the centre of the development from north to south and through green public open spaces to connect it into the wider network. Statement ends.
Thank you. The second address relates to agenda item 7. Change of use of former Masonic Lodge, Rickford Chapel, Burrington. Lucy Back supports the proposal and her address will be read out by Hazel Brinton.
Thank you, Chairman. The application concerns the change of use of Rickford Chapel, agreeing to listed former Masonic Lodge to an office, research and development space. The former tenants surrendered the property in July 2017 because they could not afford the maintenance costs of the building, and it has been vacant since then. A commercial use is needed for the building in order to provide the necessary funds for its upkeep. The main objection to the change of use appears to be the parking provision. Any use of the building will require parking, but the use proposed minimises that requirement, and, as confirmed by the Highways Officer's consultation response, the proposed use requires less parking provision than the previous use. Currently, there is only one member of staff due to be using the building, who primarily intends to cycle to work. However, under the current parking standards, only 4 spaces are required for this size of building, far less than the previous use, which could see up to 30 people attending every month throughout the year, primarily parking on the public highway. It is not possible to provide parking on site due to the watercourse running alongside the road, which would need to be crossed. Any parking on site could also adversely affect the iconic visual aspect of the listed chapel. I note the suggestions as made in public comments that the nearby orchard could be used, but this is under separate occupation, so is not available. In summary, the proposed change of use is supported by national and local policy. The Highways Authority has no concerns with the proposal. The application is being recommended for approval by the Planning Officer. It is requested that this recommendation is supported to allow this important building to be utilised. It's the end of statement, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 2, apologies for absence. That's already been dealt with. Item 3, declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests. Hazel.
Chaplain.
Thank you. Item 4, minutes of December the 16th to approve as a correct record. If you have any comments, use the chat function.
Nothing in chat, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 5, matters referred by Council, the Executive, other committees, there are none. Item 6, application 20/P/2347/RM, reserve matters application for 168 dwellings at Youngwood Lane, Nailsea. Roger.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman. I'll run through the slides first just to give some context to the application, and then I'll refer to the update sheets and highlight the sort of critical points from that. So the first slide that we have up here is the red outline of the application. So there is an outline planning permission over the larger site here. That was granted on appeal a couple of years ago. And this first reserve matters application is the area within the red line shown on this particular plan. So the broadest part at the top of the page here that's in red is the area where predominantly the residential proposals are, but the reserve matters also include the main road infrastructure, which is necessary to provide access to various other pieces of infrastructure that need to be constructed at the outset. I think I'll come to it on another slide where it may be a little easier to see, but along the lower part of the page here, you'll see Youngwood Lane. Along the left-hand side of the plan is Netherton Wood Lane, leading to the junction with St Mary's Grove and Engine Lane. And at the top of the site is the proposed, the existing bridle way, which abuts the Uplands site, which many of you will be familiar with as well. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is an aerial photograph of the site. The principal area for the residential development in this first reserve matters application is the area shown with the cursor there. It's the one which is in the sort of buff colour, so it wasn't in grass at that particular time. Again, taking the opportunity to give some context to this, you'll see the junction with Engine Lane just at the top corner of that buff coloured area. And as again, many of you will be familiar with, there's the Engine Lane development, which was approved by this committee off to the left there. Following down from the left-hand side of the site, you'll see Netherton Wood Lane. And the outline permission effectively confirmed the point of access into the site from the top end of Netherwood Lane, Netherton Wood Lane, and then at the bottom end, close to its junction with Youngwood Lane, the main estate road will re-emerge at that point, and that also was fixed as part of the outline permission. You can see the context of much of the southern edge of Nailsea on this plan. Youngwood Lane follows round close to where it says St Mary's Grove on this plan, and that travels off towards the east. And for context, over to the right-hand side of the page, you can see Backwell Lake, and below that, Nailsea and Backwell Station, which was a particular point of discussion in getting communications and sort of links through to that that were discussed at the planning appeal. And finally, just to give a little bit more context, you'll see the pairings slightly above Backwell Lake, the green icon there. You'll see the pairings running sort of left to right, again in the direction of Buckland's Batch. That's it. Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is an indication again of the proposed layout, and gives a little bit more context as far as the structure of the plan for the whole of the outline area, but bearing in mind that the parts that are covered in this first reserved matters application are only those enclosed by the red outlines. So on this, you can see a number at the bottom edge of the page. You can see a number of the attenuation pond features, which are an integral part of the drainage strategy, and the green infrastructure, which it forms a particular sort of feature of the site, is shown on here fairly obviously in green. So there's the central space there. There are various corridors which often reflect the line of bat flights, and again within this first reserved matters application, there's existing vegetation on the southern edge. The off-site bridle way to the north, which also has a good deal of vegetation and tree cover along that. There is a central area that runs north to south, where the cursor is. That incorporates a proposed cycle route of 3 meters width, and links with one of the two locally equipped areas for play. And then finally, I think down the right-hand side, the right-hand border, again, there is a border of existing vegetation, which in places will be further supplemented. And at the bottom end of the site, Youngwood Lane is visible. I'll just take the opportunity of highlighting as well, it's not very easily visible, but the proposed reservation for the possible strategic road that could be required across the site, and which was covered in some detail again at the outline stage in the planning appeal, that reservation is shown, and that is something which satisfies our highways colleagues that is correctly depicted and gives us flexibility around the design of that route should it be required in the future. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, this one focuses a little bit more detail on the current residential part of the proposal. Again, at the top edge, you can see the bridleway, which is just off-site. The houses are depicted on here with the sort of blue and brown colouring, and that denotes one of the particular amendments and improvements that we've seen to the scheme during negotiations. So there has been there is a better differentiation to create distinct character areas and variety within the development area. So the topmost road here, which runs from left to right across the page and largely has the sort of blue dwellings shown along there, that is proposed to be developed with one particular sort of style and grouping of materials, but it's also one where there is particular avenue planting to create particularly a sort of attractive avenue route along there. And there is an area of traffic calming where the proposed cycleway crosses that, leading down from the bridleway down in this phase as far as the locally equipped area for play, and at a future stage beyond that through the phase 2 as far as Youngwood Lane, although that is something that we are seeking a little bit further clarification and certainty as to how that will be dealt with, but it doesn't form part of this application. Again, briefly, you'll see that there were 4 blocks of apartments on there. Those are particular features within the layout. We did ask for those to be revisited to try and ensure there was a bit more variety, and that they created slightly more landmark features within the development. And without dwelling greatly on them, this slide and the next one show 2 examples of the 4 apartment blocks where fairly differentiated treatment has been done to add variety to the layout. Okay, thank you. I think that was the main part of that was the presentation. If I can briefly take the opportunity to just highlight what's on the update sheet. You'll see there is listed quite a lot of additional information and amended plans that we received from the applicant. Particularly amongst those, I highlight the fact that we've had revised designs and revisions to create the additional character areas. The north-south cycleway through the public open space has now been increased to the 3-metre width that we require. There is additional tree planting that's been incorporated into the layout, and there's been further information to demonstrate compliance with the Section 106 requirements for the open space land, and there are detailed landscape planting schedules which reinforce the ecological requirements and objectives associated with the outline permission. There are additional street scenes, details on materials, house types and so on. In significant measure, those additional details and amendments are considered to be satisfactory, but there are still some aspects of those that are being assessed. We don't have comments from all of our consultees yet, so that is something which remains to be done. You'll see we've highlighted 10 additional letters of objection with the additional principal planning points focusing on the house types, the character of the development, the proximity to the northern boundary, the attenuation ponds, and traffic calming. In terms of those concerns about the construction traffic, we've highlighted there that that will be dealt with, that will be addressed under the construction environment management plan, which was a condition on the outline permission. But there will be other measures incorporated. The Town Council, we've summarised a number of additional comments from them, and we've responded to those on the update sheet. In particular, there were concerns about that I think the Town Council would have liked to have seen the north-south spine road delivered prior to occupation of any dwellings on the first phase. That's not something which is required by the outline permission, and is in addition something which I think we would view with concern as potentially encouraging traffic along the lanes at an earlier stage than we would like, and before proposals such as the North Somerset Moors super cycleway network might be put in place or advanced. We are satisfied that the applicant has addressed the concerns, I think, about sustainable energy generation. They are proposing solar PV panels. They are also proposing the infrastructure for EV charging points for each of the houses. We've probably got a little bit of further work to do to see whether we can get that incorporated for the apartment blocks as well. The house types, I think they are a contemporary approach to those, but they've been viewed by the design review panel and are supported by our urban design officer. I think concerns about the cycle link from Engine Lane and through or encompassing this site and getting as far as Backwell rail station, again, was a particular concern that was raised at the planning appeal. And effectively, there is a financial contribution of over £300,000, which will be made to the council. It's essential, really, that the route follows the bridleway to the north of this site, but beyond there, it will be North Somerset's responsibility and timescale, effectively, to get those works completed. And my understanding is that whilst there are some debates, I think, about the precise route that that cycleway might follow to the east down as far as Backwell Station, that is something on which it's likely that there will be a consultation exercise on that, so that interested parties will have an opportunity to comment on that. Just, I think, finally, in terms of officer comments on that, there was, I think, some criticism of traffic calming feature and road narrowing on St Mary's Grove. That is something which is required by planning condition on the outline, and I think something which we view as being advantageous in reducing traffic speeds in the general vicinity of the school, the primary school. On the update sheet, there are also some comments from Tickenham Parish Council, although those largely relate, I think, to the principle of the development and the traffic implications, and those really are matters that were debated at the outline stage. So a couple of additional comments from consultees, but to conclude, our recommendation remains unchanged from that on the agenda papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Councillor Tonkin.
Thank you, Chairman. First, can I take the opportunity to thank Roger and Sally for all the work they put into this application. I'd like a point of clarification, first off, if I may, Roger. I'd like to know the items that you've got listed on the bottom of section 1, where it says officer comments and it says design and layout and highway and transport. Are those which have not been resolved conditional?
Roger.
Sorry, Chairman, I was just waiting to unmute. Sorry, can I just clarify that those are in part B of the recommendation on the agenda papers?
All right. Which means, sorry, can you clarify that?
Okay. On the original report,
yes.
Our recommendation of approval was subject to 4 aspects, part B of which was the resolution of outstanding matters in relation to road safety audits and phasing of highway access and roads. In that respect, I mean, we have carried out further investigation of that, I think, since the report was written, and certainly as far as the phasing of the highways accesses are concerned, we've.
That's not what it's concerning. The Highways and Transport says amended plans and additional information are satisfactory, but the parking proposal remains unacceptable.
Right. My apologies. Sorry, I misunderstood where you were referring to.
Those 2 items there, coupled with the design and layout, the proposed house types and sizes are under review for compliance. So it's those 2 items there that I wanted to just to clarify that if they are outstanding, that they're conditional.
I believe that the housing sizes and so on have been examined. There has been further information submitted by Taylor Wimpey on that, and our understanding and our belief is that those are compliant with the national space standards. It is the case that we are not satisfied yet on the parking provision. That relates, I think, particularly to the apartment blocks, and there will be some need for further discussion to resolve those points. Effectively, the proposed recommendation would mean that we would have to return to discuss those matters and then if satisfied, we would need to discuss those with the chairman, vice chairman and local member before we could make a decision. So there aren't specifically planning conditions in the recommendation at the moment, but it is explicit that we would need to resolve that and come back on those points.
So that's not central to the to the acceptance of this application at this point in time.
Well, I think through you, Chairman, I think certainly the matter of the car parking in particular is something that we would wish to see that resolved to our satisfaction. So that is effectively part of the recommendation, and we would be intending to go back to Taylor Wimpey to say this needs to be addressed.
Does that therefore mean that we would have to defer this recycle before compliance?
I don't see it as being necessary, because I think that's something which we frequently end up in discussion with applicants about. Invariably, we will manage to resolve that, and I think in this particular case, we will, if we receive amended plans that address that, we will be advising the chairman, vice chairman, and yourself as local member of those amended plans. Should they still fall short for any reason, then I think we would have to reach some sort of view as to whether that was a critical issue or not, and then I think talk with you over that point again. Okay then. Well, following extensive consultation with both our officers and the applicant, I would like to endorse the officer's recommendation for approval, and I look for a second. Thank you, Chairman.
Second.
Chairman, the request to speak from Councillor Hearn, Bridger and Crew.
Councillor Hearn.
Right, thank you. I just have a couple of points on this. There was a site layout, the one that had the blue houses across the top. I'm a little concerned as to what these red starred buildings are, because I can't find any idea of what they are in the little plan that I printed off. One next to the footpath, to the right of the footpath that goes to the bridleway, is one of them, and there's 5 altogether. What are those properties? Why are they particularly starred out? I think it's either 90 or 91. I know one's one side of the path and one's the other.
Through you, Chairman, may I answer that?
Yes.
Those are particular plots where they were considered to be at key points through the layout, and they are ones where there are perhaps higher quality materials and particular design features to effectively give a sense of orientation within the site. So it's quite a key sort of urban design principle that you incorporate some points which give a bit of legibility to the scheme, so they don't all look the same. You know where you are in the development by reference to some of those differentiated buildings. So they're essentially key buildings, key focal points.
Right. The other thing to do with the properties themselves are the colouring of them. Now, I know you're still in discussion with this, but the properties around that area are either brick, or they may not be rendered as such, but they are white painted or a light coloured paint in a lot of instances. And the fact that sort of properties behind them are on the other side of the road to where this is, I'm a little concerned that these properties do in this diagram appear to be quite dark. And I've got the appeal document with me, and one of the things I'm concerned with, and when I spoke at the appeal meeting, is the vehicle routes to and from site for when the work is carried out. You're on about the change in road at St Mary's Grove, but we have got along that road, just slightly off it, 2 schools. So I'm concerned with the travel arrangements for the construction vehicles. I want to make sure that that is dealt with at this stage, because if we're passing this, which it's important for the local residents.
Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think if I deal with that sort of point first, I think we understand that that's very often a point at which there is concern shown by nearby residents. It is a matter which is effectively covered on the outline permission. There is already a condition requiring a construction environment management plan, and I think as part of that there would be a necessity to agree the routes followed by construction vehicles, because we appreciate that there are a number of there would also be the point about to coordinate with traffic that may arise off other neighbouring sites such as Engine Lane as well. So there will need to be details submitted by the applicant. Those will be scrutinised very closely by colleagues in the highways team as well, and we will be looking to ensure that the impact is as little as possible on both residents and on the fabric of the surrounding lanes as well. So I think that point is well made and is anticipated. As far as the design of the dwellings is concerned, I think it's perhaps just worth bearing in mind. I mean, there are a variety of materials shown. There are, I think, 3 different types of brick proposed and some render. There's also some boarding or cladding, which I think we felt was a good contemporary feature. That's something which we still got freedom to agree the colours. So whilst they're shown probably in fairly dark shades, I think on the plans here, it's perfectly open to us, I think, when it comes down to agreeing samples of those materials as to which ones can be followed. So we can certainly adjust the mix, I think, to ensure that there's a greater proportion of lighter finishes as we think appropriate on there. As I say, that they are fairly contemporary types of finishes, and I think that the advice that we had from our urban designer was that this wasn't in immediate proximity to existing historic development. I think there is a listed building further to the south of the site, but to all intents and purposes, it probably becomes a relatively self-contained site where it can start to create its own particular character as a neighbourhood.
Councillor Bridger.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, obviously the principle of development has been established, appeal on this one. So, there will be housing that will go on this site, and we're at the reserve matters stage. And this is about detail. My honest thinking before the committee started, having looked at all the documentation over the last few days, was that it felt slightly premature coming to committee today, to be perfectly honest. It feels like it needs another month, because whilst we're talking about detail, there are so many details that feel like they're outstanding, that you think that, if this was in my ward, I would probably have said, could we possibly wait another month before bringing this to committee? So, I mean, we've received the update sheet this morning, as we normally do on the day of committee, which I always have a bit of an issue with. There's an acceptance there that there's a lot of the amended plans that are still being assessed. And I know that officers will be on top of all of this, but I know on the planning portal, a hell of a lot of documents went up only on Friday on the planning portal. Nailsea Town Council considered this on the 13th of January, so I mean, that's not long ago. It just obviously there's a balance on this. Clearly, the feeling on this is that we need to work at some speed. I'm not quite sure why there's such an ambitious timeline on all of this one, other than the obvious one, which was we need to deliver housing. But as I say, housing is going to go on this site. There just seemed to me quite a lot of fairly important matters. I mean, the flood risk team's comments from the 7th of January on the portal suggest there's more work to be done, although more work might have been done on that before today. The design review panel, I mean, this is one of those sites, one of the few sites we took and Taylor Wimpey took to the design review panel, I think, at the very end of October. They submitted their comments on the 4th of November. I looked at those. That's not that long ago. So, I would have, been minded to defer for a cycle, to be perfectly honest. I'm not, with the understanding that, housing's going to go here and everything. There just seems to be quite a lot that is still not absolutely secure, really. I mean, Taylor Wimpey is saying, well, yes, that's fine, we'll deliver this on phase 2 and phase 3. Well, I mean, they would say that. So I think the design review panel was saying that, we need to see a step change now in how places are set. I think their words was how places are assembled to prioritise for active travel, health and well-being, to respond to the climate emergency, and I share that view. And it may be that we're pretty much at the point we've gone as far as we can, because I recognise it's about balance and the negotiation effectively with the developer. We need the houses, but I'm still a little bit uncomfortable, given that there's so many matters still really the officers themselves are still looking at to actually, to be honest, to go for approval today. But I'd like to hear what other what colleagues have to say on this one.
Councillor Crew.
Thank you, Chairman. Following on from previous speakers, it's to me it's in line with what I would have expected following on the outline applications. And yes, I congratulate the officers for all the work they've done on reserved matters. My view is, as long as they continue those reserved matters resolution, we can carry on with approval, subject to that all being done. And I think, picking up Steve's point, I think if we were looking at an outline application, I think from now on, yes, Steve's points are valid, but I think we need to bring it forward at the outline. There's only one thing I have a problem with, and that is the parking. The comment about parking being unacceptable, I think there's something which must be resolved, because I'm living here with 2 estates where parking is horrendous, so we didn't get it quite right. But the most important thing is now, with the public space protection orders going to exec shortly, we've got provision in there for dealing with people that make it difficult for our refuse vehicles. We've got NSEC coming online, looking at a new way of recalling car number plates and so on. It seems to me, if that is a current problem, any new application that we're approving, it's important, if our officers think it's unacceptable, that we do resolve that properly. What we don't want to do is end up in a 12-month time after they're all finished and find that our vehicles are having trouble clearing rubbish, and we have problems, complaints from neighbours because they can't park properly. I think now that has become a high priority that we must get right. Other than that, I'm happy with everything else. Thank you, Chairman.
Roger, do you want to respond?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I mean, there's quite a lot of points to sort of pick up there. Firstly, as far as the highways and parking are concerned, I think over sort of the last several years, I think issues such as the ability to negotiate estate roads with refuse vehicles and so on has been very much a feature of the discussions through colleagues such as James Wigmore. So on the nearby Engine Lane one, for example, there was quite a lot of time spent, in fact, on that in ensuring that things like the road widths were correct, that the radii were negotiable by refuse vehicles and so on. And as far as I understand it, that has been the case in this particular layout as well. I certainly know that refuse vehicle manoeuvrability around here has been part of the discussions. I think we do view the parking as something that must be resolved, because you're right. I think random parking is probably the bane of a lot of refuse collection drivers' lives, trying to sort of negotiate around those. And that's why, in particular, we've not just looked at the numbers of parking spaces. We've looked at where, for the apartment blocks, things like visitor spaces have been located, and we've drawn attention to the point that in some cases those are considered to be too distant from the particular apartment blocks to be really attractive to actually use. So very much committed, I think, to doing that. And as you will have heard in my response to Councillor Tonkin, that's something that we would come back and discuss how that's evolved further. We would come back and discuss that with the chairman, vice chairman and local member. I think in terms of some of the points which Councillor Bridger raised, yes, we are, as with many applications, trying to work to some sort of timetable and programme on this. I think many of the changes that have been the subject of submissions have been ones that we've sought, so we know what it is we're looking for. It's not that we've just got an unsolicited set of plans where we're effectively going back to a starting point. We know what it is we wanted, and we know what it is we're looking for as to whether those plans have actually addressed those concerns. I think as regards, I think probably there are a number of comments that have been made, for example, I think by the flood risk team and the internal drainage board. I think it's important to remember that a number of those issues were aired quite thoroughly, I think, at the outline stage. There are conditions already attached to the outline permission, and I think what we're dealing with here are largely matters of detailing in relation to those. They're sort of somewhat more technical matters, some of which are to improve the general appearance, I think, so they become slightly more naturalised features as in terms of the attenuation ponds, but one or two technical matters as well, which I think we'd fully expect to resolve. I think in terms of securing various of the objectives, as I say, I mean, there is a very wide-ranging legal agreement which is in place, which covers quite a significant range and scale of contributions for North Somerset to actually carry out works. There are various other things relating to the highway infrastructure as well, and there are the planning conditions as well. And I think there was quite a lot of time spent, I think, agreeing a statement of common ground between the applicants and ourselves at the appeal. That covered quite a number of highway and travel aspects of the development, and I think in particular the desire, I think, to promote active travel is recognised in this. There is the provision for the cycleway to make its first step through this site from the bridleway to the north, which is proposed to become a cycleway in future, using the some of the contribution made from the outline permission. There are also a succession of other improvements, for example, to public rights of way, and I know the Town Council drew attention to one to the south from Youngwood Lane going towards Backwell Station. That also is the subject of a financial contribution. And I think there are other aspects of the proximity of this site which relate to projects such as one that I think that North Somerset is considering for the sort of super cycle highway across the moors towards Clevedon. So I think that active travel has formed part of the consideration on this, and I think once these various measures are all coordinated and put in place, then I think that will become fairly evident.
Michelle.
Chairman, Richard Kent has asked to speak, followed by Councillors Cherry, Bird, Solomon and Tonkin.
Richard.
Chairman, yes, I just wanted to reiterate what Roger said. He said what I was going to say in effect, but the with the way committee cycles work, it is not always easy to keep momentum up with delivery on planning applications whilst just resolving some of the outstanding points. So the direction of travel on this application is really strong. We have been working with the local members and will continue to do so. But the purpose of bringing the application to this committee was to enable members to see the scheme, to get a feel for it, see if there were any other issues that members wanted addressed, and that could be then dealt with post committee. So we just wanted to make sure we were bringing it forward. If that helps, thank you.
Councillor Bird.
My points are just talk about the access to the site. I know it's proposed that there will be an access road to this eventually, but when this development is finished, we're talking about a quantity maybe of 1,000 vehicles trying to access this site via St Mary's Grove. Now, St Mary's Grove historically has a pinch point in it about halfway along towards Hallamore, which includes a garden coming into the road with a garden wall about 3 foot high, which means there is already a narrowing of the road. I mean, the local council has hoped that this would be widened for a long time, because it does. James is doing his head. Well, it would have been preferable for it to be. At the moment, there is a visual problem there, and I can't see with 1,000 cars going in and out why the condition is actually to make the access even worse by having the narrowing even further along the road. I would think that probably that this needs ascertaining after we've got the development in, rather than while it's being done.
Councillor Tonkin.
Oh, Chairman, James Wigmore would like to speak.
Okay, I'll take James first then. James.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think I might ask Paul Payton from our Strategic Transport Policy Development team to explain about this, because he's been involved when this planning application came in the original outline. So, Paul, are you?
Yeah. Hello, James. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, we looked at this through the outline application, and it was debated at the appeal. Our rationale was because of the 2 primary schools, we wish to make St Mary's Grove as unattractive to through traffic as possible. So that was our rationale.
But it's not through traffic, as it is. It's all traffic coming from the development and travelling out towards Bristol and into Nailsea. So it's not. It has to use St Mary's Grove until there's a relief road built.
James, Paul.
Yes, accepted, Councillor. And it is it is traffic management, it's speed management, it's all of the things that are appropriate near primary schools.
Yeah, but again, the traffic is likely to turn down Hallamore, avoiding the schools anyway, to get down Queen's Road in that direction. Anyway, that's the point I'm trying to make.
I must admit I'm sympathetic towards Councillor Bird's comments, because I don't think it needs to be narrowed either. Anyway, Councillor Tonkin.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to follow on that particular point, I live on that stretch of road there, so I know it very well. And it suffers at the moment from problems with youngsters speeding along it. So if we remove this obstruction, which acts as a very efficient traffic calming measure, then we'd have a much greater problem than we've got now. But that's aside from that, pretty much I wanted to sum up on what we've said before, and that is that samples of the building appearance, materials and so on, and the parking provision, when that comes time, that is submitted not only to the chair and vice chair and ward member, but could we include a representative from the town council, because they've been very proactive on this particular application, as you would expect that they would be. And also, can I also emphasise that we must do some close monitoring of this application and its build during the course of the various phases that are going to be coming along.
Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to add one sort of further point, because I think that Councillor Bird had highlighted the St Mary's Grove issue, but there was probably a wider issue there which Paul or James may wish to comment on. But I was just going to add to say that in terms of the slightly wider impacts of traffic associated with the development, there are two off-site highway contributions which were also agreed as part of the outline permission. So there is I think £50,000 towards capacity and highway safety improvements at the North Street, Hanham Way, Queen's Road junction, and further £45,000 towards capacity and highway safety improvements in the Queen's Road, Station Road junction area. So there are measures which are part of the outline permission and part of the works that we will carry out with those contributions, which I'm sure will help with those things. But I don't know if Paul might want to sort of add anything to that.
Paul.
Afternoon. I have nothing further to add, I'm afraid.
Okay. Michelle.
Councillors Cherry and Solomon, Chairman.
Councillor Cherry.
Hello. Many points have just been covered, but I would concur with Councillor Bridger that I feel that there's still a lot of detail which is outstanding. One of the things which I'd just like to ask the officers on is it talks about improved buffers around the protected TPO trees, and they are absolutely vital to this site. So can they tell me exactly what proposals have been made?
Before I do that, I'll bring in Councillor Solomon.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that Richard Kent kind of summed things up when he answered Sandra Hearn's question about what the 4 red stars were for. And he said it's to show where you are on the site, which brings it down to what we're doing in terms of the design of sites that we're putting out there, where you have to have points to know where you are on a site, because everything looks the same. And the developers, when you ask them to approve it, they'll maybe paint it a different colour or put some cladding outside. I think we really have to hold developers more to account. I've just been working with a development that has been given to Keep Moat at Locking. And when you look at the difference in the design of that site to this particular site, it really highlights how some of the larger developers are just looking at their profit, how many builders they can get into a site, and are looking no further. It's about quality of life for the people that live on these sites. And I think we could be doing an awful lot better. Not our officers, I'm not criticising them as much as the developers themselves. Thank you.
Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, in relation to the tree buffers, my understanding is that there are green buffers along the east and west boundaries, but in particular in relation to the TPO'd trees, the ones with tree preservation orders on, we've effectively secured the removal of parking spaces from within the tree and root canopy area of those. So effectively we're ensuring that there should be no ground compaction or disturbance to the health of those trees. That's not to discount that there may be some further work that we'll do on that, but we are working closely with our tree officer. Okay. I think I very much note Councillor Solomon's comments about design. It's something that all of our officers, I think, are very passionate about, is trying to get the best quality and the most appropriate design we can in developments. Often that's quite difficult. I think there is, however, a substantial difference between this and the keep moat proposal, which reference was made to. In fact, there's probably at least two key differences. One is that on the keep moat one, we have particular control as landowner, so therefore we've been able to insist upon certain design standards, and that's been an integral part of really the discussions and the selection of keep moat as effectively our sort of partner on that one. And the other point was that there are also a series of design codes and master plans in place on the Locking Parklands development, and that's where I think it probably underlines the point about having the right policy and design framework in place that gives us much more control and much more negotiating power, I think, in these circumstances. So I think the point was well made, but I think there are differences here.
Michelle.
There's no more requests to speak, Chairman, in chat.
Roger, any more closing comments?
No, Chairman, thank you. That's been very good. Thank you.
Councillor Tonkin, can you sum up, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Only to say, can we please take all of these comments back to Taylor Wimpey for their consideration? Thank you.
Okay, we have a proposal to approve the application. Sue, please conduct the roll call vote.
Thank you, Chairman. I will take the vote from each councillor in alphabetical order, and for each vote taken, the councillor will be confirming that they have heard the whole of the debate. The motion is for approval as per officer's recommendation. When the councillor says for, it will be for approval, and against approval. Councillor Bridger.
Abstain.
Councillor Bryant.
For.
Councillor Cherry.
Abstain.
Councillor Cole.
For.
Councillor Crewe.
For.
Councillor Crockford-Hawley.
For.
Councillor Harley.
For.
Councillor Hearn.
For.
Councillor Keating.
For.
Councillor McQuillan, apologies. Councillor Solomon.
For.
Councillor Tonkin.
For.
Councillor Tucker.
For.
That's carried, Chairman.
Thank you. Agenda item 7. Application.
Chairman, if I could interrupt, I declare a non-pecuniary interest on this particular item and will, in fact, leave the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item 7, application 20/P/2020/FUL, change of use of former Masonic Lodge, Rickford Chapel, Burrington. Simon.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can take members through the slides and explain them so they'll understand the issues. The first slide is the location plan. The actual hall is coloured in red and the landowner's ownership is coloured in blue. If you're familiar, the sort of gap between the blue in the middle is the main road that goes in the south east, that goes on to Blagdon. In the other direction, in the top of the drawing, it heads towards Burrington and is the main road heading onto Churchill. Members who may be familiar with the area will know that there's a junction right in the middle of the plan where if you turn off to the small road heading to the top of the plan, there's that road leads into the village of Rickford, and just at the top of the plan, just on the right hand side of the lane, just up a bit further again, is a public house called the Plume of Feathers Public House, but it's a very tight junction. We've put that location plan up to show you that the application is only for the change of use of the building from a hall to the proposed office use. There is no car parking involved with it. On the left-hand side is an enlarged block plan, which shows the outline of the building itself. There is a stream that runs from the pond down through a sluice between the road and the site itself. Could we have the next plan, please? Thank you. This is a plan of the building itself. It just shows that it's a large hall with the entrance on the left-hand side and ancillary rooms, and then a first floor with a mezzanine area up there. Can we have the next plan, please? This is a proposed layout plan which shows a number of desks involved in it. Although the application, it says only one person will be employed there, it's just an indication of how it will be laid out. But the changes to the room are, both the main hall itself with the tables in the middle is minimal, and there's no structural alterations. Can we have the next slide, please? This is the view. You can see the hall on the right hand side of the road. This picture is taken looking towards the junction. The right hand side is the road that goes down into Rickford village. The main road goes round on the left hand side of the photograph. As you can see, the grounds around the building are landscaped. Can we have the next slide, please? Again, this is an indication of the junction itself. As you can see, there's no parking around the junction, and there's no access from the road into the site, just the pedestrian gate, and there's a little covered area as it goes across the sluice. If we can have the next slide, please. And this is coming in the other direction, and the building is on the left hand side. You can just see the two walls together, and that's where the sluice travels down from the pond alongside the road and then down through the village itself. And can we have the last slide, please? This is an aerial view. It shows the main road, the A368, and the proposal where the chapel is, and it shows the next door property, and again the Plume of Feathers pub at the top of the aerial photograph. I think if we leave that slide up, Richard, we're aware that the parish council has raised concerns and emailed members. The two concerns relate to the use of the chapel building. It was granted planning permission many years ago for change of use to a Masonic hall, and the parish council think that that means that it shouldn't be used for other things and can't be used as a general hall. The legislation in terms of change of use does refer to public halls, but it also refers to, and the latest changes to the use classes order, to community meeting places, and it could be suggested that a Masonic lodge could be used for the community of that meeting group who meet from a wider area. It doesn't just have to be for the village. But in terms of the other issue is about car parking. The parish council have suggested that off-site car parking should be provided further down the lane into the village near the Plume of Feathers. They've suggested that the land is owned by the same landowner and should be provided as a parking area. But that is not part of this application. Members are asked to determine this application on its planning merits. The two issues are, will the change of use make the parking situation any worse? We've addressed that in the report itself. The second issue is about the use of the building. It's a grade 2 listed building. As such, it should be kept in use and a beneficial use. Keeping a building, any building, but particularly a listed building, it's important that a use is found for it. And government advice is that heritage assets should be put to use as not kept empty. We consider that the proposed office use will have less of a parking need than the function of the property as a hall, a meeting hall. There were no conditions that restricted its use, and it has no parking. So we consider that the office use will provide employment opportunities in the rural area, and it will also help to conserve and find a viable use for the heritage assets. So the recommendation before members is for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Keating.
Thanks, Chair. I would like to propose that we defer the application for a cycle for a number of key reasons. First of all, I fully support finding a future use for the chapel that protects this unique and valuable building. As we've seen from the pictures shown, it adds to the character and the heritage of the village, and really sets the scene as people are driving up towards Blagden. So finding a way to protect that building is vital. But that doesn't mean we should simply just wave through whatever scheme is put before us, and we need to scrutinise the impact of this proposal to convert the chapel into office space. And I think particularly the issue around parking needs to be addressed better. You'll have seen from the images there's a lack of parking provision around the building itself, but equally Rickford Village already has parking difficulties. The junction to the A368 is very challenging, and we've seen if people do park in that small lay-by, and we've seen that in recent weeks where work vans doing some work in the chapel have been parked, that creates some safety issues and concerns for that what is quite a difficult junction. And anybody who's been to Rickford or visited the Plymouth Feathers will know well the difficulties of manoeuvring vehicles in and out of that space. In fact, last year we had somebody put their car into the stream because they were experiencing difficulties manoeuvring and parking in that area. The other point to note, I think, is during the public statement by the applicant, they noted that visitors to the chapel, when it was being used as a lodge on a monthly basis, actually parked in nearby fields. There was very little, if any, parking on the public highway, so I think that's worth taking into account. I think there's merit in what the parish council say about seeking some off-site or off-road parking nearby, which would allow both the project for conversion to go ahead, which we're not against, but providing some safe, secure parking, allowing the site to be used properly. It's noted that one person will be using the office, but would they be having visitors? Would they seek to expand the premise? We've seen from the plans there's a number of desks and workstations in the planning, so I think that also needs to be taken into account. I note that there's an offer to put in cycle parking, which is great, and I'm fully support active travel, but will people be choosing to cycle to work in the weather like we're experiencing today, or would they prefer to rely on the vehicle? So really what I'd suggest as a way forward is to defer the application for a cycle, to give the applicant an opportunity to address these issues and to bring forward further ideas and further proposals and do some more detailed thinking about how appropriate off-site vehicle parking could be delivered. Thanks.
Is there a seconder?
Yes.
Councillor Tonkin. Simon, do you want to come in to respond to those comments?
Well, our understanding is that the applicant is saying that the alternative provision of off-site parking isn't available. I understand from when the Masons did have a meeting once a month, the arrangement to park in a field was a somewhat ad hoc arrangement with them, but that isn't something that was ever subject to a planning permission or anything over which we can control. So as the report explains, the use could carry on, and they could meet every day of the week, every night of the week, with absolutely no car parking. There are no conditions that affect the use at all, as it's used as a hall. What we've said that though that usage would generate more car parking than the proposed use as offices, and therefore we understand that in planning terms that would result in a reduction of the need for car parking. I think if I ask James Wigmore just to come in and explain a bit, because he's very familiar with this particular site and parking issues there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so if I can explain, so the existing use as a community hall, as a church hall, as a this kind of meeting place would have a parking requirement of 12 parking spaces under our current parking standards. What they're proposing as the office use only requires 4 parking spaces. So the current under provision of parking is 12, and somebody could come in and start using that venue as a meeting place tomorrow, and there'd be no issue with that in planning terms, as I understand. But if this gets the planning use gets changed to offices, and that actually happens, it does start being used as offices or an office, then it can't then go back to the previous use without a change in the planning. So what this application does actually do is it ties it down to a planning use that has a lower parking requirement. So there's no way we could argue that the impact on the highway network is severe because of the parking, the increase in parking, because what they're proposing has a lower parking requirement.
Thank you. So, Michelle.
Councillors Tonkin, Harley and Solomon have requested to speak, Chairman.
Tonkin, Harley and?
Solomon,
Chairman.
Councillor Tonkin.
Thank you, Chairman. I've known this building for many years, and given its Grade 2 listing, it is essential that it doesn't fall into disrepair for lack of use. It was only used one day a month during the summer months when it was occupied by Freemasonry. I also support the application in the main, but cannot support the lack of car parking. I understand that this is in the gift of the owner of the listed building to supply car parking on an adjacent field, which is also in his ownership. Therefore, can our officers talk to the owner along these lines and bring this application back to this committee? And that could, I'm hoping, will act as second for Councillor Keating's proposal.
Councillor Harley.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wondered when you took the photographs of going through the village, actually, because I didn't see any cars or anything, but there we go. Yes, I know the village very well. I've actually lived around here for 40 years, used it quite a lot, and I can honestly say that it's never been any different. There's always been a problem there, and there always will be. I think at the bottom of the village in Rickford, there was a framing company, Amended Framing, and that was really very busy, and an art business there. As it has been adhered to, the Wills family own most of the area around there. Yes, and that building is absolutely superb. I would just like to question, and I'm obviously respectful of other people's views, but I just don't understand what a site visit would do, what it would do to any of us to go out there and see it, because it's a well-known site. There's always been a problem with getting out onto that road, for, as I say, in the last 40 years. And if we don't do something about it, I think we do not want to see a grade 2 listed building that is as beautiful as it is sink into disrepair. And we can all have our views on it. I'm very mindful of protecting the A&OB, and this is what it's doing. It's not changing on the exterior or inside. And can I just say, we need to probably look, I've heard questions now or about, oh, well, you know, people travelling to the site. We are going through some very difficult changes here now, even in North Somerset Council, whereby many people are going to be working from home. And so a lot of work is going to be done on the computer. I would hasten to add that there would be very few people visiting that place. There might be only one person in it. And I think, as I say, that we have to be very careful how we move forward on it. But I think a site visit would, quite frankly, probably not do anything at all.
Councillor Solomon.
Thank you. Yes, I take both speakers' points on board about the building. It's a beautiful building. I know it very well. I also know the pub very well. I also know the difficulty to get to the pub and park by the pub. Now, you talk about at the moment, with its existing use, you could have people turning up there in volumes, but that's not happening. So we know that's not happening at the moment, and we don't know if it's likely to happen. We do know that if we give it planning permission for offices, I counted 14 seats in the existing plan, and I've heard that there's a possibility you could have 30 desks in there. Now, 30 desks could mean 30 cars, and 30 cars, where are you going to put them? And that's on a daily basis. So until we can actually identify some parking for this building, especially if it's in the remit of the current owner, you know, he might have let that field out. Well, he needs to think about unletting that field and allocating some parking. So I wouldn't support this current application without the parking being addressed. Thanks.
Michelle.
Councillor Cherry, Chairman.
Councillor Cherry.
Sorry about that, couldn't unmute myself quickly. Just to say that I do agree with the other councillors. I do think that you cannot separate this from the parking issues. And yes, we all really appreciate grade 2 buildings, but the reality is that with workers, they will need probably to get there. Not everybody can cycle to their office, and we have to be practical. And so I agree with Councillor Keating's proposal that the applicants go back and try and sort out parking as a priority before anything else happens. Thank you.
Michelle, any other speakers?
No more speakers, Chairman.
Simon, any closing comments?
No, thank you, Chairman. We've heard the discussion and I've noted it.
Councillor Keating, do you wish to sum up?
Oh, Chairman, Richard Kent has asked to speak.
Okay, Richard.
Chairman, yeah, just before we go to the vote, I think it's important just to recognise that this is a proposal for an employment use, which we need to encourage in North Somerset, particularly in our rural areas. But also just to reflect that the site is in the AONB, so there's no guarantee that a formal car park could be provided in a way that would be acceptable in terms of the AONB. But that would be a matter that we'd have to work on. And the final point I just want to make, although it's accepted the existing use building is underused, it is a meeting hall. I guess one point to reflect on is, supposing it was the other way around and the building was currently used for an office and they proposed to convert it to a meeting hall, I suspect you would be saying the parking would be far worse than the existing employment use. So I think you just need to be a bit careful, because it may be dormant, but it could be a lot worse than an office use in the long run. But that's all I want to say. Thank you.
And James Wigmore was asked to speak as well, Chairman.
James.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to perhaps give an example. Under the current planning use, it could open again, say, as a scout hall, and then you'd have a situation where lots of children would be dropped off to the site, and if you compare that to an office use, that's likely to be a lot more disruptive and wouldn't require any change in the planning permission at all. Thank you, Chair. Okay, Councillor Keating, do you wish to sum up?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Useful debate, and I think the bulk of councillors acknowledge that, and as I do, and indeed the parish council do, that we do need to save this building and find a use for it. But at the moment, as things stand, the parking issue is not sufficiently scrutinised and looked at. So I continue to put forward a proposal to defer this, to allow that work around further exploring opportunities for delivering parking, even if it is the 4 spaces that are under provided. That's still an under provision that I think needs to be addressed before we can all in good conscience bring this project forward. Note the comments by officers that this is perhaps a least worst situation, but the other situations that have been put forward are indeed hypotheticals, and we're looking at the situation that is on the table in front of us, which still has a number of parking issues. So I think I would call on us all to support a deferral and ask officers to continue to engage with the applicant to think through and look at opportunities for off-site parking in the area, at which point then we can be a lot more confident in moving forward and saving this building for the future and for the village. Thanks.
Thank you. So the proposal is for deferment for 1 cycle. Sue, please conduct the roll call vote.
Thank you, Chairman. I will now take the vote from each councillor in alphabetical order, and for each vote taken, the councillor will be confirming that they have heard the whole of the debate. The motion, as the Chairman has just said, is for deferment for a cycle. When the councillor says for, it will be for deferment. Councillor Bridger.
Against.
Councillor Bryant's left the meeting. Councillor Cherry.
For.
Councillor Cole.
Against.
Councillor Crew.
Against.
Councillor Crockford-Hawley.
For.
Councillor Harley.
Against.
Councillor Hearn.
Abstain.
Councillor Keating.
For.
Councillor McQuillan, apologies. Councillor Solomon.
For.
Councillor Tonkin.
For.
And Councillor Tucker.
For.
Chairman, that's 6 for deferment, 4 against and 1 abstention.
Okay, so that's carried.
Chairman, could we just confirm there was no request for a site meeting?
Yes.
Thank you.
There was
I
none.
don't know where that. I don't know how
There was none.
There was none. Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 8. Planning appeals and the update on the airport. Richard.
So, Chairman, yes, you've got a full list of appeal decisions received and appeals lodged. You'll be pleased to see that, as mentioned at the last meeting, that Cinderford Cottage, which was an application that you considered, was dismissed, which is good. And as we said last time, that shows the officers have done a good job in defending your decision for you. Again, we remain very busy, and we do have a number of appeals coming in, and the enforcement team in particular have got a succession of appeal deadlines at the moment, which is adding to their workload. You may have seen, hopefully, on the update sheet that we have now had the formal start date for the Bristol Airport appeal. So the starting going in effect was fired on January the 11th, and we had the official letter from the Planning Inspectorate, so everything now flows from that. We have therefore officially notified all the 11,000 people that commented on the planning application of the appeal. They've all had mostly have had emails, and those that didn't email us have had letters telling them how they can comment on the appeal. All those comments go directly to the Planning Inspectorate. We have already packaged up all the comments. We've had both the planning application stage on the more recent listing on the amended information. That's all gone to planning inspectorate already. So the appeal will be start on the 20th of July. It's currently planned for 16 sitting days, although we think that's probably going to be tight. We expect it potentially to be longer than that, because even without the planning issues, there is a compulsory purchase order inquiry that would follow on from that. The planning inspectorate have appointed 3 inspectors to sit on this appeal, which is certainly not the norm. You occasionally get a pair of inspectors on a local planning examination, but you don't, such as the JSP. But it's very rare to have more than one on a planning appeal, and that's what's happening at the Stansted public inquiry, which opens this week. So if anybody is interested, you can watch the Stansted inquiry online. And that does have a panel of 3 inspectors, and it's following that route. It's too early yet to know whether our public inquiry will be virtual, as is going on at Stansted, or whether it will be element of face-to-face. We'll know that nearer the time, no doubt, and much depends on lockdown and COVID and tiers and all that sort of thing. So we have a team of consultants and a QC appointed that are actively engaged in shaping the council's case, and we move forward on that basis. But we will keep you up to date through this meeting and through members only.
Thank you. Agenda item 9, there is no urgent business, so that concludes today's meeting, but can members please stay online?